February 28, 2016, 10:48 p.m., Dolby Theatre, Hollywood. The envelope is already open. Leonardo DiCaprio stands under a wash of gold light, tuxedo perfectly tailored, face controlled but tight around the eyes. The room is on its feet before his name is fully spoken. The applause isn't polite, it's thunderous, relieved, almost cathartic. For 22 years, the industry has been building to this moment. The camera cuts to Kate Winslet crying, to Martin Scorsese proud but unsurprised, to the front row of Hollywood royalty nodding as if something has finally been corrected. You can almost feel the temperature in the room shift, not because he won, but because the narrative is over. For years, the story surrounding DiCaprio wasn't just about performance, it was about pursuit. When will he win? Became a running subplot of awards season. Memes, think pieces, panel debates, each nomination without a win added pressure but also momentum. Pressure can be fuel. And that night, as he grips the statue and speaks about climate change, about gratitude, about responsibility, something invisible dissolves. The chase is finished. But here's what no one in that room could measure. What happens to a career built on pursuit when the pursuit disappears? For over 2 decades, DiCaprio operated like a man with something to prove. After Titanic made him the most recognizable young actor in the world, he did something unusual. He avoided the obvious. No easy romantic leads, no formulaic blockbusters. Instead, he aligned himself with auteurs Scorsese, Nolan, Mendes, Tarantino. Each role felt strategic, each performance carried weight. The Aviator, Blood Diamond, The Departed, Shutter Island, Inception, Django Unchained, The Wolf of Wall Street. There was intensity in his choices, physical endurance, emotional extremity, characters on the brink, addicts, con artists, obsessive visionaries. It wasn't just range. It was escalation. Every few years he delivered something that felt like an argument: I am one of the best actors alive. And beneath that, an unspoken truth. He had never been validated by the highest symbol of the industry he dominated. Awards don't define talent. But in Hollywood, they define narrative. And narrative defines power. When The Revenant entered production, it wasn't framed as another role. It was framed as the test. Alejandro González Iñárritu demanded brutal realism, sub-zero temperatures, natural light only, endless retakes, physical suffering baked into the process. DiCaprio crawled through snow, ate raw bison liver, endured freezing rivers, shot for months in punishing conditions. The headlines wrote themselves. This is the one. By the time awards season arrived, the outcome felt inevitable, not because of campaigning, but because the industry had collectively decided the arc was complete. The overdue genius. The final recognition. And on that February night when he finally held the Oscar in his hand, something subtle but seismic occurred. The urgency evaporated. Not publicly. Internally. The years that followed were quieter. Not empty, but measured. Between 2002 and 2016, DiCaprio averaged a major film every 1 to 2 years, a steady cadence, a rhythm of relevance. After The Revenant, a 4-year gap. 4 years in modern Hollywood is an eternity. In that span, franchises rise and collapse, streaming empires expand, new faces dominate timelines. But DiCaprio didn't rush back. He returned in 2019 with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, a reflective role, playing an aging actor confronting irrelevance. A meta choice, self-aware, nostalgic. Then another gap. Another recalibration. The pattern was no longer about proving range or collecting acclaim. It felt deliberate. Controlled. As if the man who once chased validation had stepped outside the race entirely. And Hollywood noticed. Because in an industry that rewards constant visibility, absence is power. But why would someone at the peak slow down? Was it comfort? Exhaustion? Or something far more strategic? Because sometimes the most powerful move in Hollywood isn't the next role. It's refusing to take one. The morning after the Oscars is always quieter than people expect. March 1, 2016, 9:12 a.m., Beverly Hills. The headlines are unanimous. Finally, at last, deserved. The overdue narrative has officially closed. The internet moves on within hours, it always does, but inside agency offices and studio boardrooms, a different kind of conversation begins. What do you offer a man who no longer needs to prove anything? Before the Oscar, DiCaprio represented unfinished business. That made him urgent. Studios could position projects as the one that gets him there. Directors could pitch him on legacy-defining roles. Campaign strategists could mobilize the narrative. After the Oscar, the leverage shifts. You're no longer chasing. You're curating. And psychologically, that is a dangerous transition for high achievers. For more than 20 years, DiCaprio's career ran on forward motion. Each project felt like a step toward something: deeper respect, greater artistic credibility, industry validation. Even when he insisted publicly that awards didn't matter, the pattern of his choices suggested an acute awareness of how Hollywood measures greatness. Awards are external fuel. They create structure, stakes, momentum. Remove that fuel, and an actor must confront a quieter question. Who are you performing for now? Elite performers often operate on a cycle of tension and release. Tension pushes them to endure discomfort, to take risks, to go further than comfort allows. Release, in this case an Oscar, can bring satisfaction, but it can also bring drift. Without tension, urgency softens. You can see it in the spacing of his films. 2016 to 2019, silence. But it wasn't disappearance, it was recalibration. Behind the scenes, DiCaprio's production company, Way, expanded its development slate. He increased his environmental advocacy visibility. He became more selective, not reactive to momentum, but insulated from it. There's a subtle difference between being booked and being unavailable. Unavailable creates myth. Hollywood runs on supply and demand. When a star is constantly visible, the audience adapts. When a star retreats, the value compounds. Absence forces recalculation. DiCaprio understood something many actors don't. Relevance doesn't only come from presence. It can come from restraint. When Once Upon a Time in Hollywood finally arrived in 2019, it wasn't the explosive, physically punishing performance of The Revenant. It was introspective, vulnerable, even comedic. Rick Dalton, a fading television star grappling with obsolescence. It was almost confrontational in its self-awareness. An actor who had just secured his permanent place in Hollywood mythology chose to portray insecurity about fading from relevance. Why? Because once the pressure to prove disappears, the only remaining risk is stagnation. And stagnation in Hollywood is invisible death. But DiCaprio didn't chase spectacle after his win. He didn't pivot into franchise dominance or flood the market with prestige projects to capitalize on momentum. He slowed. And in doing so, he altered the power dynamic. Studios couldn't pressure him with timelines, directors couldn't assume availability, award season couldn't script another redemption arc. He had completed the storyline. So he wrote a new one. Here's the industry insight most audiences never see. Hollywood loves unfinished arcs. The comeback. The breakthrough. The overdue genius. But once an actor completes the myth, wins the Oscar, secures the legacy, the system subtly shifts. The hunger surrounding them fades, the urgency to reward them diminishes. They become, in a strange way, stabilized. Stable doesn't trend. And DiCaprio seemed to recognize that the only way to maintain influence after peak validation is to create scarcity. Scarcity generates control. Control generates leverage. And leverage is the real currency in Hollywood. Between 2019 and 2023, he appeared sparingly. No franchise commitments, no cinematic universes, no streaming series to pad visibility. Instead, carefully spaced collaborations: Martin Scorsese again with Killers of the Flower Moon, familiar territory, trusted partnership, legacy alignment. You could argue he retreated into comfort. Or you could argue he fortified his position. Because when a star proves they are willing to wait, truly wait, the industry must wait with them. That's power. But here's the deeper psychological layer. What if the Oscar didn't just remove pressure? What if it removed fear? Fear of being overlooked. Fear of being labeled never quite. Fear is a potent motivator. Without it, ambition transforms. And transformation in Hollywood can either expand influence or quietly dissolve it. The question wasn't whether DiCaprio would remain relevant. It was whether slowing down would make him untouchable or forgettable. Los Angeles, 2020, production offices across the city sit half-lit, development slates are being rewritten, streaming platforms are accelerating, franchises are expanding at industrial speed. And Leonardo DiCaprio is nowhere in sight. Not in a superhero suit. Not in a limited series. Not attached to a surprise streaming deal. In an industry that rewards saturation, he remains selective, almost distant. That distance is not accidental. When an actor no longer needs awards, headlines, or box office validation to solidify their status, a psychological shift occurs. The performer stops reacting to opportunity and begins shaping it. The difference is subtle, but in Hollywood, subtle shifts determine long-term dominance. Before 2016, DiCaprio's career felt like escalation. After 2016, it felt like filtration. Projects were no longer about climbing. They were about protecting altitude. There's a concept in power dynamics called strategic scarcity. The less available something becomes, the more negotiation tilts in its favor. We see it in luxury brands, in elite athletes, in political figures who speak rarely but deliberately. In Hollywood, constant exposure dilutes mystique. Stars who overextend themselves become content providers. Stars who withdraw become events. DiCaprio chose to become an event. Killers of the Flower Moon wasn't rushed. It wasn't reactive. It was methodical, a return to Scorsese but with a different tone, quieter, more restrained, a role rooted in moral ambiguity rather than explosive intensity. He wasn't chasing another Oscar narrative. He was operating from security. Security changes performance. When actors perform under pressure, there's urgency in their choices. When they perform from security, there's control. And control is what Hollywood respects most, even if it rarely admits it. But this isn't only about DiCaprio. His post-Oscar recalibration mirrors a broader pattern among Hollywood's most powerful figures. There are moments when the most influential people step back, not because they're losing relevance, but because they're protecting it. Daniel Day-Lewis disappeared repeatedly at the height of his acclaim. Cameron Diaz stepped away entirely at peak marketability. Rick Moranis withdrew from stardom when he was everywhere. None of these exits were failures. They were decisions. And decisions, when made from strength, reshape how the industry responds. Hollywood recalibrates around absence. When someone refuses to be constantly visible, the machine can't overexpose them. It can't commodify them beyond their control. It must wait, it must adjust. That adjustment creates influence. Think about it. Before 2016, DiCaprio needed the system to validate him. After 2016, the system needed him to reappear. That inversion of dependency is the quiet redefinition of power. Actors who need the industry compete. Actors the industry waits for dictate. And in the years following his Oscar win, DiCaprio subtly transitioned from competitor to gatekeeper. He became selective not just about roles but about timing, about partnerships, about public visibility. Even his interviews became rarer, less promotional noise, more controlled messaging. It wasn't withdrawal. It was containment. Psychologically, there's another layer at play: identity reconstruction. For decades, DiCaprio's public persona was intertwined with the best actor without an Oscar. It was a paradoxical brand, admired yet incomplete. When that identity dissolved, he had to redefine what ambition looked like. Ambition without a visible mountain can become disorientation. Some performers overcorrect, they chase bigger spectacles, they double output, they attempt to prove they're still ascending. DiCaprio did the opposite. He slowed his ascent. Almost as if to test something. What happens if I don't chase? Will the system forget me? Or orbit me? The answer revealed itself over time. The longer he waited between projects, the more each announcement generated speculation. The more directors publicly expressed interest, the more audiences treated each appearance as cinematic gravity. He wasn't fatting. He was consolidating. Hollywood is a machine that feeds on visibility, but it also reveres myth. And myth requires distance. In a landscape where actors flood streaming platforms and attach themselves to franchises for sustained exposure, DiCaprio's refusal to bind himself long-term kept his myth intact. No cinematic universe contracts. No multi-season commitments. No dilution. Just carefully spaced, prestige-aligned appearances. It's not louder. It's rarer. And rarity has become the new form of dominance. But here, the tension that lingers beneath it all. What if the Oscar truly changed nothing about his talent, but changed everything about his relationship to need? Because once you no longer need approval, applause, or validation, you're free. And freedom in Hollywood is either the beginning of reinvention or the beginning of isolation. Which one is it? Cannes, May 2023, late afternoon. The sun hangs low over the Crescent, turning the Mediterranean into molten gold. Crowds press against metal barricades. Camera shutters crackle like static in the air. A black car door opens. Leonardo DiCaprio steps out, measured, composed, almost understated. No urgency, no theatrics, just presence. And the crowd reacts like something rare has arrived. Not because he's overexposed. Not because he's constantly trending. But because he is. That's the difference. By the time Killers of the Flower Moon premieres, 7 years have passed since the Oscar win. 7 years of selective appearances. 7 years of strategic packing. 7 years of Hollywood quietly adjusting to the fact that he will not be everywhere. The industry has changed dramatically in that time. Streaming has accelerated production cycles. Actors sign multi-project deals to secure algorithmic visibility. Social media has collapsed distance between star and audience. But DiCaprio has remained largely insulated from that acceleration. He hasn't anchored a streaming franchise. He hasn't serialized his image. He hasn't diluted his mystique. Instead, he's become something almost old-fashioned. A theatrical event. And theaters, increasingly rarefied spaces, benefit from that kind of star power. There's an unspoken rule in Hollywood: momentum is survival. If you disappear too long, the industry replaces you, new faces emerge, attention shifts, market share redistributes. But that rule only applies when absence is unintentional. When absence is chosen deliberately, consistently, it communicates something else. It communicates independence. And independence is deeply destabilizing to a system built on access. Before 2016, DiCaprio was part of the awards ecosystem. He attended, campaigned, engaged. After 2016, he no longer needed that ritual. His name could enter awards conversations without visible pursuit. The dynamic inverted. The industry no longer evaluated whether he deserved another win. It evaluated whether it deserved him. That subtle shift changes negotiation rooms. Studios approach differently, directors pitch differently, even co-stars calibrate differently. Because scarcity creates gravity. And gravity reshapes everything around it. But there's a psychological tension beneath strategic scarcity. When someone removes themselves from constant validation cycles, they also remove constant affirmation. Applause fades faster when you're not feeding it. That requires a different internal foundation. Actors who are driven by external metrics often struggle when those metrics disappear. Without constant premieres, award nominations, or trending conversations, self-worth can destabilize. But DiCaprio's post-Oscar years suggest something else. A move toward internal anchoring. More focus on environmental advocacy, more alignment with legacy-driven projects, less visible concern with frequency. It's not retirement. It's restraint. And restraint in Hollywood feels almost rebellious. There's another layer here, one that extends beyond DiCaprio himself. When a major star slows down at the peak of market power, it disrupts industry expectations. Executives build models around consistency, agencies forecast availability, studios plan slates years in advance. But when someone refuses to commit to constant output, they can't be slotted neatly into projections. They become unpredictable. And unpredictability, when paired with proven success, is intimidating. That intimidation generates leverage. Leverage shapes creative control. Creative control shapes legacy. Consider this. Had DiCaprio capitalized aggressively on his Oscar momentum, signing a franchise, stacking releases, maximizing exposure, he would have remained constantly visible. But constant visibility comes with diminishing mystique. Instead, by pausing, he allowed anticipation to accumulate. Anticipation compounds. And compounded anticipation increases stakes. Now, every time his name attaches to a project, it signals significance. Not volume. Significance. That distinction quietly redefined what Hollywood power can look like in the modern era. Power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it simply declines. But here's the unresolved question lingering beneath it all. Is this strategy sustainable in a landscape accelerating faster every year? Streaming platforms produce hundreds of films annually, new stars emerge from viral platforms overnight, attention spans compress, cycles shorten. Can absence still command influence in an age of oversaturation? Or is DiCaprio's model a final echo of an older Hollywood, one where stars were rare, guarded, mythic? Because if strategic pause becomes misinterpreted as detachment, if restraint drifts into irrelevance, then even the most carefully protected legacy can erode. So the real transformation after that Oscar night wasn't about slowing down. It was about redefining visibility itself. And that redefinition may be the quietest, most powerful career move he's ever made. But power built on absence carries one final risk. Eventually, you have to return. October 2023, New York City. The lights dim inside a packed theater as Killers of the Flower Moon begins to roll. There's no desperation in the room, no sense of comeback, no marketing narrative built around redemption or urgency. There's something else. Wait. When DiCaprio appears on-screen as Ernest Burkhart, the performance isn't explosive. It's restrained, uneasy, human in a way that feels almost anti-spectacle. He isn't dominating scenes with theatrical intensity, he's inhabiting them. And that choice matters. Because this is what power after validation looks like. It's not louder. It's quieter. The Oscar in 2016 didn't change his ability, it didn't suddenly make him a better actor. What it changed was the psychological architecture beneath his career. Before there was pursuit. After there was permission. Permission to slow down. Permission to choose differently. Permission to exist without proving. That permission is rare in Hollywood. Most actors are caught in a cycle of maintenance, maintaining relevance, maintaining momentum, maintaining visibility. The treadmill never stops, and if it does, it's usually involuntary. But DiCaprio stepped off at the peak of strength. That decision reframed what dominance could look like. Dominance through scarcity. Influence through absence. Authority through restraint. There's an almost paradoxical truth at the center of this shift. The Oscar that was supposed to crown his career didn't elevate him. It liberated him. Without the weight of overdue hanging over every performance, he no longer needed each film to carry existential stakes. He didn't need another extreme transformation to justify his place. He didn't need to escalate. He could refine. And refinement is often the mark of someone who knows they've already secured permanence. But here's the deeper industry consequence. When a figure like DiCaprio slows down and maintains influence, it challenges the myth that constant productivity equals power. Younger actors are often told the opposite: stay visible, stay trending, stay attached. The system reinforces it. Yet his trajectory suggests a countermodel. Control the cadence. Guard the brand. Let anticipation do the work. Hollywood, for all its noise, still respects restraint when it comes from strength. It recalibrates around those who cannot be rushed. You can see it now in how his projects are framed. When his name attaches to a film, it signals seriousness, craft, prestige. It feels curated rather than assembled. That perception isn't accidental, it's the result of years of declining what didn't align. And declining offers, especially lucrative ones, is one of the clearest indicators of power in an industry built on yes. Because the person who can say no consistently without consequence has already won. So was that February night in 2016 a peak? Or was it a pivot? On the surface, it looked like the end of a long chase, a narrative resolved, a box checked. But beneath the applause, it marked something quieter. The moment he no longer needed Hollywood's validation to define his trajectory. And when an artist reaches that point, their relationship to the system fundamentally changes. They stop reacting to it. They start shaping it. In a culture that equates visibility with value, DiCaprio's career pause quietly redefined Hollywood power. It suggested that influence isn't always measured by frequency. Sometimes it's measured by patience. Sometimes it's measured by how long the industry is willing to wait. And 7 years after the Oscar that changed everything, what actually changed was invisible. The urgency softened. The cadence slowed. The leverage increased. The Oscar didn't make him bigger. It made him freer. And in Hollywood, freedom is the rarest award of all.